Um, okay. So for people who here in the room doesn't know who Stephen Briggs is?
Stephen.
That was Kelly, otherwise known as Mrs. Cake at these things. Anyway, so I take it that everyone here is familiar with Stephen Briggs? Okay. So I don't need to be telling you that he is one of the few members of the Order of the Honeybee. Yes, you're wearing your honeybee. Yep. So does everyone know what is involved in being a member of the Order of the Honeybee? Okay, Stephen, could you possibly tell the audience what it is and how you got that role?
Well, what's involved in being a member of the Honeybee? Not an awful lot, to be fair. I think those of us that are sort of active members sort of see ourselves as being the kind of the guardians of Terry's view of Discworld, insofar as we can have any kind of impact at all, to make sure that it's presented in the right way, that it's engaged with in the right way, and that we are all of us more Terry. It started back at Terry's memorial service in the Barbican Centre. Um, and none of us were expecting it, but Rob started calling us up onto the stage and then announced there was this honeybee thing that Terry had asked him to set up for people who he thought had been significant contributors to Discworld and to his um, writing of and creating of Discworld. And that included me, Pat Harkin, who's probably somewhere around in the hotel, and David Lloyd, of course, amongst others. So it was a bit of an honour, obviously. It's nice to be remembered. We all got a nice badge out of it, which is very, very smart. And there was supposed to be an annual dinner in Terry's memory, but that's never happened. The most we get is occasional gin and tonic at a convention in a corner.
That reminds me, Rob, who we spoke to just earlier, sends his love. Okay, so for people who may not be as familiar as others with your work on the Discworld, can you just start off by telling us how long ago and how you got involved with Discworld adaptations and all the other lovely things that you've done
Well,
with Terry?
I'll give you a quick history.
Yeah.
It began in about 1990, so long before the internet and long before email for most of us. If you weren't a geek, you didn't have emails back then. And my drama group had been doing adaptations of one or two writers' works, and we'd reached a bit of a block in that the writer we were then adapting had just signed the rights over to Channel 4 for several of his books, and it meant his entire book list was blocked. So I was looking for something new to do, and I'd already written to Douglas Adams to ask if we could do Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But sadly for me, my letter landed on Douglas Adams's desk about a month after he'd signed the rights to Disney. So we no longer had control over Hitchhiker's Guide, sadly. And then somebody said, try Terry Pratchett. I think you'll like his humour. So I picked a book up at random in the bookshop on the railway station in the city where I worked. That was Mort, and read it and I liked it. Read all of the ones he'd written up till then, which was at that point in paperback. This is, I couldn't afford hardbacks, which was then Guards, and then wrote to him and said, could we do Weird Sisters? And we did, and he came to see it. And I said, it's a shame you're going to do a film of Mort, because I wouldn't have minded doing Mort next. And he said, well, what difference can it make? Nobody's going to not come and see the film because you guys have staged it in this tiny theatre in Abingdon. So off you go. And then partway through adapting Mort, a colleague at work was reading the Middle-earth Companion, and I was in the middle of also reading a lot of Cadfael. And the Smiths had got a Cadfael companion on the shelves. And I just dropped Terry a fax. For you young people, fax was email in the old days. You wrote things out on a piece of paper, you typed them, and then you put them into a telephone machine, and it transmitted the message, which then printed out at the other end as another piece of paper that looked just like the message you'd sent. So it was more or less instant, and it was like magic. And so I faxed this to Terry saying, I just seen this Cadfile companion. There's a Middle-earth companion. You know, you've written, whatever it was, 15 Discworld books. You want to think about doing a Discworld companion. Nice little learner for you. Now, my fax machine at work was about 10 feet from my desk, but just outside my little tiny office. I got back to my desk. As soon as I got back to my desk, the phone rang, and it was Pratchett saying, are you saying you want to write this? And I had no intention of writing. I had no idea what was involved in writing a companion. I just thought it was a good idea and I was just lobbing it into the stratosphere. So I said, well, yeah, give it a go. And he said, well, it's not a matter of giving it a go. It's not a new idea, you know. It's not something you thought up. It's been on the cards for ages. What I don't know is, he says, is what do I do with it? Do I give it to somebody who's a professional indexer who will take every single fact in all the books in meticulous detail, and then I, Terry Pratchett, have to take time off from my very important work of writing books that make me money in order to make this thing even remotely readable? Or do we give it to people who are Discworld fans, who probably already fancy themselves as being fantasy writers and will want to put their own spin on it? Or, he said, do I give it to somebody who's neither skilled nor a fan? And genuinely, I think what intrigued him about me wanting to do the plays as well was somebody outside the genre who thought his stuff was good. I mean, not thought it was good, but he being recognized outside the genre he was at that point trapped in. He was a fantasy writer, a comedy fantasy writer, and that was it. So I think initially that's why I like the idea of doing a play, because when you're sitting in a room on your own typing a book and you see a few people at signings, but other than that, hundreds of thousands of people are reading your book, but you don't know what they think of it. The idea that somebody thinks it'll make a play and then going along and watching people sitting in a theatre laughing at your stuff is interesting for writers. And then, yes, the fact that I was suggesting this, and I wasn't a fan, I was somebody who would do whatever he said, his Discworld, after all, not mine, is where it all sort of kicked off. But then he said, but what I want you to do is start by mapping Ankh-Morpork. And the one thing I did know was this was not the way to start indexing a series of books. Because the
Yeah.
idea is you start with book one, you write down every fact that's important all the way through, and then you've got your text for your companion. What you don't do is go through the entire series of books only picking out the facts about one particular bit, knowing that at some point you're going to have to go through the whole thing again and do everything again to do the companion one. However, that's the way we did it. And so it started from there. Map. Only map to make it bestsellers lists.
Yes, and go into how many reprints and all the rest of it. What are we up to? The
I
Discworld
don't.
Companion?
Colin can tell you that I don't know anything about those sort of things, but it would have been reprinted a lot and in lots of languages. That's the fun bit. When they used to pop in sort of Polish and German and French and Spanish, and it was great.
Yeah. While researching just and also looking on my bookshelf at home to prepare for this interview, I was surprised to realize that you were also a contributor to Nanny Ogg's cookbook, and I didn't actually have time to flick through and see what might have been your contribution, but can you remember what you did?
Well, about half of the cookbook, probably a bit more than half, is mine, because although Tina Hannon did the testing of them and did produce some recipes as well, her main function when we actually did it was to actually road test all the recipes and make sure they worked. Um, Terry and I put forward things which we thought would be amusing things for somebody to have a recipe for, like Angwer's vegetable goulash, whatever it was. And then I'd find a recipe or I'd use a recipe I knew, and then we'd put that together. And then we found, as you know, Wow Wow sauce, the original recipe for that, and dug that out and tried it. I tried that one and found it worked. But along with all that, and then Terry would write the occasional funny one as well. But obviously, he made the recipes funny. I mean, anything that's funny in the book is down to Terry. Anything that's to do with cooking is down to Tina or me. Um, and the introductory stuff was a kind of a collaboration between the two of us. So I did do quite a lot of it. I did do quite a lot of road testing as well, bits and pieces, not an awful lot, but a lot of it. But yes, we sort of picked characters and decided what they might like and then what might suit them, then trying to find historic recipes that might suit it. So it was a collaborative effort. Yeah, it was fun to do.
I'll just repeat that. What was Sir Terry's favorite recipe?
Oh God, do you know? I don't know. I mean, if when we ate out, we often ate at Indians and Chinese restaurants. So I think Terry was quite fond of a curry. At Pratchett Towers, he tended to eat vegetarian because Lynn was a vegetarian, is a vegetarian. So food at the Pratchett household tended to be vegetarian as well at home, but he would eat meat when out. But given that the vast majority of Indian food has strong vegetarian dishes within it, if we ate out while doing a signing tour and things in India, we'd both have veggie. So veggie curry was the sort of thing he went for when we were out.
Mm. And follow on from that question, what was your favorite recipe from Nanny Ogg's cookbook?
Oh gosh, you're going back a long way now. I could cheat and say Lord Vetinari's bread and water one, but that would be God. I can't remember. I can't actually remember any of the stuff in there. I think sure I've got a copy in the room. Where are my glasses? What are you people doing with my glasses at all? I'm not even sure there's a copy on the shelf. I don't know. One of the one that is I think it's a speedy bean goulash type thing is one of the ones that is one of our recipes. So I guess I'd say that one, which I
Okay,
think is the angle one.
cool. Well, I myself can admit to having made the strawberry wobblers on more than one occasion. Yes, much
Well, it
experimenting was done to try to get them to come
doesn't
out.
work with glasses.
Yeah,
I'm not much for I'm more of a savoury than sweet person, so the puddingy type things aren't the ones that would appeal. So no, I've not made a strawberry wobbler.
yeah. Okay, we have another question.
Did you try the wow sauce and what did it taste like?
Okay, I don't know if you heard that one, probably not.
Our sauce,
The wow sauce, yes. Have you tried the wow sauce?
yes. Um, Once we realised that the sauce did exist, um, I had then had to research it. Luckily, at the time, I had reader access to the Bodleian Library in Oxford, because in those days, with no internet, there's no look it up on the internet and there it is. You had to go and look up in books. So I had to go into the Bodleian and look into their Victorian recipes and search for it. And we found it was not called wow sauce, but it was that sauce with pickled walnuts and all the rest of it. And so having found it and had a photocopy taken of it, I then took it home and bought the ingredients. At the time, randomly, pickled walnuts were not easy to find. Nowadays, and it may be, I don't know, it's because of Terry, nowadays they're on most supermarket shelves. Who knows? Maybe everyone's making it now. And
Yeah,
so I tried it.
I don't think that's the case here in Australia. Has anyone here seen pickled walnuts? You have? Where did you find them? Ah, farmers market, so artisan walnuts. They're definitely
Yeah,
not a thing in Queensland.
well, in Britain, of course, people are food snobs, and there's all sorts of stuff available on shelves you wouldn't even believe. But yes, so they were available. They were difficult to buy initially, and there was no Amazon to order things off either. But we did try it. We both tried it then. I tried it and he tried it with beef, of course. And it's very nice. It's very nice, actually. It's really rich. I've not made it for a long time because my wife is a vegetarian, so we don't have an awful lot of meat in the house. But yeah, I can recommend it. It's worth the effort of making it.
No, you don't have your glasses on. You missed an audience member.
Beagle with the sheep.
Yeah, we had a Feagle stealing a sheep just then.
Yes, I saw the sheep.
Where can we find your recordings of the Discworld books to listen to? Are they still available on platforms? Where can we find them?
I
And are
was
you
recently,
sending away for them?
I was recently told that they are now available again. As you probably know, when they started doing the David Tennant and other famous people versions, they immediately dumped or withdrew all of the Nigel Planer and my versions of the books, which was a shame from our point of view, but you recognise it costs a fortune to have A-list people reading a book, so you want to make sure you're actually selling them in order to get your money back. And I thought they'd gone for good, but then a UK fan, no, it's not true, a Dutch fan messaged me and said, "Did you know that your audiobooks and Nigel's are now available on some kind of podcast access from Audible?" Now, I don't have the link. I gather, because I announced this on Facebook and joyously, and then people said, "I can't find it." But Lillian did put a link up to the one that she used, and it is, I like it. I can find what the link is and let people know, not right now, I mean, but rather like in government questioning, I'll respond later in writing. But yes, they're apparently available from Audible on some kind of podcast thing. I don't know what podcasts are, how they work, and why that's different to the way Audible normally do their audiobooks, but apparently all or most of mine and all or most of Nigel's are now back for free. I mean, I say for free. Nigel and I get snuffle from them anyway because it's a flat fee thing with Audible. Once Audible took them over, that was it. But Audible isn't getting anything out of it either. So that's quite cool, isn't it?
Yeah, that is excellent. And yeah, if you do find a link, I'm sure if people follow you on Facebook, you might be able to share it there for them.
If I find a link, I'll pop it onto the convention page.
Excellent, even better. Yay! Okay, so have we got any more questions from the audience? Yeah. Yeah.
2011, a man with a Sharpie signed a banana. Now, apparently, there's an anecdotal story out there that that banana still exists. Do you still sign fruit?
Did you hear that one?
I did hear that.
Banana.
I don't think I've signed food of any kind for quite a while yet. I signed a dog at the last UK convention. Short-haired dog, but even so, it's quite difficult to sign, even with a Sharpie. And it wasn't my idea, I hasten to add. I don't go around signing dogs randomly. Not into cruelty to dogs, but no, I haven't signed a piece of fruit. Assuming you agree that bananas are fruit, of course. I mean...
It's a type of fish.
But no, I think that the banana was the last thing I ever signed, edible-wise.
Okay, have we got any more questions? Yep.
Hi, Stephen. It's Gabby here. I'm just doing a little bit of marketing as well because Stephen has donated kindly an uncorrected proof of his newest Terry Pratchett adaptation called A Trip on the Stage, which is going to be in the charity auction on Sunday. I would love for you to tell us a little bit about that production because it's great play. When you donated the script to us, you were just in the casting stages, I do believe. But I went on to the web and smash hit, sell out, not a seat available whilst you were in the production. So I'd love to hear or have you tell everyone a little bit about that because it's really fun.
Yeah, thanks, Gabby. Well, I was looking around for the next book to adapt, and there were one or two sort of on the list. And a lot of the time when I'm adapting Discworld, I describe it as being like the dog in Up. I'm easily distracted by squirrels of other ideas. Like, for example, I wrote an adaptation of Witches Abroad about 6 years ago and finished it 6 years ago and planned to stage it 6 years ago. And during the course of the summer, I then suddenly thought how I could stage Dracula instead. No, that's not true. I did Julius Caesar first. I suddenly thought how I'd like to do Julius Caesar, and so dropped Witches Abroad and did Julius Caesar. The following year, it was going to be Witches Abroad, and then I did Dracula because I wanted to do Dracula for ages, and suddenly I thought of a way of staging it I thought would work. So I tend to get my drama group knows if I say, "Oh, I'm going to be doing blah next year," there's a good chance it won't be because I'll get sidetracked. And I hadn't really got any idea in mind. I did stage Witches Abroad, by the way, 2 years ago. And then I thought it might be quite fun to do something along the lines of the trip on the keyboard, slip on the stage thing, slip on the keyboard and blink of the screen things, and do some stuff that represented the kind of wider Terry writings, not necessarily just Discworld, and to look at those, which I'd not really read, been sent copies and bought the occasional one off eBay, but not actually sat down and read them. So I sort of thought about it. I thought a trip on the stage might be a fun idea as a title. Messaged Rob and said, "What do you think?" And he went, "I love it." So I thought, right, in that case, we're off. So I then went through I still got them there, the slip on the stage, not slip on the stage, slip
Flip
of
on
the
the
pen,
keyboard.
slip on the keyboard, thank you. And those ones, and picked out bits and pieces, and some bits from Discworld plays that I quite liked, or books, not necessarily the plays even, because I used the Sphinx bit, the Sphinx's riddle from Pyramids, and I used Rincewind arriving in Eric's bedroom from Eric, which I'd not actually adapted before, but thought they're quite nice little scenes to have on their own. Shoved it all together into a piece, and it went really well. I mean, really well. We were quite surprised. We thought it'd be a difficult one to sell because you're not selling a title that fans know what it is. But they all came. It sold out. And it got really, really positive reviews. People liked the ideas. They loved discovering new bits because there's a thing called Glastonbury Tales in one of them, which is a kind of a semi-parody of Canterbury Tales. And we did that, and it worked really nicely as a little bit of stage thing, which you wouldn't think it would, and nobody was quite convinced at the beginning. But we sort of made it work as a little piece, and that went down really well. And it was good to see those bits of Terry engaging with people. And so it went so well that immediately afterwards people were saying, "Oh, is there going to be a trip two?" And I thought, well, yes, there could be a trip two, but unfortunately, circumstances at our theatre may defer that for a year or two. And I've contacted Rob and said, "Oh, everyone loved it. Would you be up for a trip too?" And he said, "Absolutely." So that is now hanging in the air. But as some people may know, we've been staging Discworld plays at the Unicorn Theatre in Abingdon. It's a kind of medieval building, which has an awful lot of drawbacks in terms of lack of heating, lack of access for disabled people, and all that kind of stuff. And they've been wanting to do something about it for ages. And way before COVID hit, they got some money from the National, not some money, they put in a bid with National Lottery to do some refurbishment. That all got parked during COVID, and then it came back again, and then they started raising money again for it. And it now looks as though the building is going to close at the end of June and maybe shut for 1 to 2 years. So we won't be able to stage anything in any kind of decent sized auditorium in the area because there aren't any. There's nothing between the Unicorn, which has 85 seats, and in Abingdon, the Amy Theatre, which has 450. Now, that's a lot. And admittedly, you could actually fill it for one performance with the Discworld fans that come and see a Discworld show. But it's a building that size needs about 30 people on front of house to make sure the audience is managed safely. We've only got a membership of about 35, so we'd have nobody in the cast. They'd all be just managing the audience, so it's not feasible for us. So that means it's all going to be parts down the road until the Unicorn Theatre reopens next year, year after. In the meantime, we'll be doing smaller cast plays in less obvious venues, old magistrates' courts, churches, that sort of thing.
That was
Yeah,
interesting.
so that was the trip, and it worked well. We're very pleased with it.
Yes. Might I suggest, have you considered maybe looking at the Dragons of Crumbling Castle and putting together something for children that's Discworld and the same, well, not quite Discworld, but like Terry and something aimed at children. Just give you another little side way to go down.
Children, I doubt it. It would be.
Well, and Pratchett fans, obviously.
It would be a trickier sell for us. The Unicorn has a strong tradition of children's Christmas shows, which the other group that uses it tends to do. But it would be a tricky one because we'd start promoting it like we normally do, and the box office would open. Discworld fans would take over the vast majority of tickets, and when the children of Abingdon realised the show was on, it would already be sold out. It would be a tricky one to do, to try and hold it back, because even if, say, we said, right, we won't start selling tickets until the normal time, about a month before the show, it would be hard to get Abingdon people to realise that when we say book early, it's a Discworld one, Terry Pratchett one, that you actually do have to book early. We're not joking. When we say early, we mean if it box office opens at 9, you need to be there at 9, because by 9:30, chances are most tickets will have gone. So it would be a tricky one to do. Doesn't mean I wouldn't do one, and I have done 3 plays that have been published by Oxford University Press, specifically for schools and children to perform, well, to use as study guides, study texts, but to perform as well. Amazing Morris, Johnny and the Dead, and Dodger. So I have done children's plays, but not stage one. We did Dodger, but it wasn't a children's play at the time.
Yes. So what we're
Children,
talking about, what you have done, is there anything either Discworld or non-Discworld that you have coming up soon? Anything?
Well, we've always got something going on. I mean, it's not exactly Terry Pratchett. We're doing Merry Wives of Windsor in June, which we're resetting in Abingdon. So the references and stuff is all to do with Abingdon, just to keep it local, given that it'll be the last play we do at the Unicorn before it closes for its refurbishment. Beyond that, we don't really know, because we're still waiting to try and locate and confirm dates at possible venues in Abingdon. We've got one in mind, but we're just waiting to get confirmed dates. So we're not able to kind of make any kind of real plans, because the one we've got in mind probably would have taken an audience of maybe 50 at a push. But it would limit what you were able to do, because it's quite a small venue. If you're doing a bigger venue, you've got other sort of concerns. So all those things are up in vague. However, longer term, and fluke would have it, I've even got it here. I've been looking at, this is a particularly terrible cover design, Light Rise to Candleford. When I say looking, over Easter, we went up to Lake District for a kind of a very short break. And the Theatre by the Lake in Keswick was doing Light Rise to Candleford. A little ironic, we'd driven up from Oxfordshire, where the play is set, to watch it being done at the side of one of the lakes in Cumbria. But it was a 2-hour production of what is a very thick 3 books. It's very small print. And it worked really well, because they did what, in the same way that I do with Terry, you find out what the actual main thread of the plot is, and you try and stage that, and only include as much of the outsidey bits as are necessary to make it work. You can afford to cut out stuff that doesn't take the main plot through. And that's what they did. So in 2 hours, they got over the spirit of the book and the central character's journey from being trapped in a very small hamlet in Oxfordshire to realizing that she could actually expand her horizons, not just through reading books, but by actually just taking control of what she did. She moves to another very small, a slightly larger village about 8 miles away called Candleford in the book, and starts working in the post office there, and things move on for her from there. And it's just that kind of journey of discovery was quite fun. And we thought, oh, that's interesting, I thought. And I thought, Flora Thompson is out of copyright, which is even better. So, and they did it with a cast of 6. That would be a bit too few for us, but it means that it could be done on a relatively bare stage with a fairly limited cast. So just long term, it's sort of simmering, but I need to focus on Merry Wives of Windsor first, but I'm not terribly good at that kind of thing. I nearly always, like Terry, like to have the next thing in my mind simmering away as well. But because it's such a big brick of a book, it may take me a while to get around to reading the entire thing and then working out which bits to include. But that's sort of there. Beyond that, Discworld, I've not started thinking, because I know it's going to be trip 2. I don't want to get too involved in that yet, because it could be 2 years before I get to do it. And it just depends how things are then.
Okay. So I think we have another question.
Hello, Stephen. My name is Silvana. I met you
Hiya.
back in 2017 where you signed my iconograph, and I disgusted my husband by telling you that you are in my bed every single night. I listened to every one of your audiobooks and was but by the way, I've just checked while we were listening to you. The podcasts are on the Australian Audible. I live with Audible, but they're only in chapters as opposed to you've got to download each individual podcast, which is only an hour long, in order to make up the 35 chapters of, say, Wintersmith, for example. But my question to you is actually, given that Rihanna is now taking over some of the productions or looking at potential productions, say, of Night Watch, if I'm right, is there any likelihood that you might be approached to be in it? I could really see you as veterinary.
I think sadly it's really unlikely. I came really close twice to being in the Sky versions. The first one, when he did Colour of Magic, the whole thing was kind of being chucked together by some lads, so it was kind of smaller scale and seemed more manageable. And there was because Lord Veterinary was in it for only about that much of the entire film, there was a strong chance, Terry thought, that I might get to be Veterinary. But, as you know, Sky wants to have people in there that would sell it, that names that people would recognise, that actually people would think, oh my God, it must be quite good because it's got blah on it. And they'd asked Jeremy Irons, and really couldn't really. And I remember it was when Bernard had his Scout Jamboree in Wincanton, and Terry took a phone call while we were doing some signings, I think, and he said, "Oh, it's Rod from Mob. What's a word with you?" And that was him telling me that they got Jeremy Irons to do it. And I thought, well, you can't really argue. Bloody Oscar winner, you know. It's and then of course they wasted him. They didn't direct him, and he was only in it for 5 minutes. So he just did what he did. And he could have done it better, in my view, but they were probably a bit too scared to direct him because he was a famous actor. He would have taken direction, I've no doubt, but they didn't. And so it's a pity. And then when he did Hogfather, it hadn't got veterinary in it, but Terry was saying they were thinking about putting me in as Dr. Downey. So the first scene with Theatame. And then they got David Warner to do that because they wanted a name, and they wanted a name that summarized the nature of the character. So given David Warner's previous film history, if David Warner's playing, you know the guy's got his dark side. So that was the nearest I got to being in it, apart from being an extra in Colour of Magic. And I think now these things have moved on, and only big companies are going to be involved in making any kind of filmed versions, and probably the old days, like with Mob, where they would get gangs of the Discworld fans to come along and big crowd. That probably won't happen as easily with more professional ones as they go ahead. So I think it's less likely.
Which
Sadly,
is a shame, yeah.
I'm still cheaper than all the others. Elderly fans back from the day when Terry and I first got together, when I used to first do the signings, and there was always chat on what was then called Out Fan Pratchett about who people would cast in what parts. That still happens, as you know, in some parts of Facebook. People would always be saying Alan Rickman and Charles Dance and the guy, Geoffrey, what's his name, who was the Emperor of Austrian Amadeus, and all these people. And as some of you may know, in The Last Action Hero, Charles Dance plays the bad guy with the glass eye. And when they sent him the reading script, it still had Alan Rickman's name on it, crossed out. Because they couldn't afford Rickman. And when Charles Dance arrived on the first day of filming or at the table read, he was wearing a T-shirt that said, cheaper than Alan Rickman. So I used to wear a T-shirt that said, cheaper than Alan Rickman, Charles Dance. I don't know. Just as an homage to that. So I'm still cheaper than them. I'm the kind of the, if you can't afford to pay anything, veterinary.
Mhm.
If there's no money in it, it'll be me, because they won't get David Tennant to play veterinary for nothing. But they can always go, oh, Briggsy, all you got to do is do this. There's no money in it. In fact, if you pay us, we'll make sure you're on stage. No. Nah, I think not. Unfortunately, not.
Mm. Okay, so do we have
I
any?
did think actually, I did think I might get to be drum knot to Charles Dance's veterinary, but they didn't do
Oh,
that either. They got Stephen Thingy from Inside Number 9. Though I was drum knot to Ray Fearon's veterinary in the radio adaptation of Unseen Academicals. That was quite fun.
uh, yeah. Okay, I have got another question over there. There we go.
What drew you to adapting fiction into plays? Obviously, there's something that you enjoy because you've done a lot of it, but what is it about that interests you?
What, adapting things for the stage, did you say?
Yes.
Um, that's a good question, actually. I think part of it is the same thing that draws me to Amdram in the first place, is I quite like the fact that a play is a kind of a project that you see through from beginning to end, from like a sort of blank sheet of paper through to a show that's live in front of an audience. And I quite like that process of building it and making it work from being something which is nothing at all, just words on a bit of paper, through to being a live thing. And when I can see how to, in my own word, in my own mind anyway, how to get a book off the page and onto the stage while still retaining those bits of the original book, be it Terry, be it Bram Stoker, or Dickens, retaining the bits that are going under the soul of it, the way it was originally envisioned, then that is quite satisfying too. So I quite like that. I think it's partly that thing where I suddenly think, oh, actually, I could see that working like that. And it sort of then draws me in to think wider about how the rest of the plot would work and then how it might look on the tiny little stage that we have with no effects and anything else. And then to watch that sort of develop from that into being a stage production and seeing how that goes and seeing how it just lands is a satisfying thing. Like it's creation, so I guess it's creating something, albeit fleeting and temporary. But I think that's what actually draws me into it.
Okay, so the very fact that it is temporary, that it's an interpretation.
Yeah, the temporary nature. I mean, my drama group for many, many, many years, we finish a play on the Saturday, and on the Monday we have the first reading of the next play. Um, it's like when they say with people win an Oscar and they say it's very good, but when you're going to win the next one, it's once you've done it, that's done. So you do a play, then you move on. And there's something about that which is quite fun too. Although it is nice to get the plays published and then find other people doing them. That's quite interesting to know that they actually work outside the original vision that started them off, and then going to see them. Like when I wrote The Amazing Morris for OUP, it was the first time I'd adapted a book where I had no intention to stage it. So I wasn't constrained by what I knew we could or couldn't do in our theatre. So I could just write it, which meant I put things like so and so happens without having to worry about how you make that happen. Just put it in. But then a couple of years after the book came out, a school about 40 miles away did it, and I went up and saw it, and it actually worked. And I don't mean to sound surprised. It was good to see it working, given that I didn't write it with the intention of it being performed. And indeed, OUP don't publish them specifically to be performed. They're published to be classroom projects. They have a lot of work stuff at the end that sort of feeds out from the text of the book. But to see it actually being staged and it working and being good fun was a very interesting experience. So that was quite fun too. But yes, in the context of our theatre, once we'd done it, people sort of say, "Oh, why didn't you go back and do guards again?" I go, no, I don't know. I've done guards. I don't want to do one again. I don't like redoing stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yep, another question. Yeah, no, that's okay. I think we still have a bit more time in here before they go turfing us out of the room.
I do have a question for you. For those of us all the way on this side of the earth, down at, what are we called here? No. Forex, thank you. Forgot about that. That's the beer. Have you ever videoed or had someone video your plays so that we could enjoy them as well?
No, we haven't. We've been through phases of thinking about it. But the thing is, I've seen videos of plays based on YouTube, and when people used to send us discs and cassettes of them, VHS cassettes back in the day, when we used to ask them to send one so that Terry and I could see what they were like. But the trouble is that video really does take the life out of things. It flattens it, it deadens it, the sound's terrible. By and large, most amateur groups video their show by having one camera at the back of the hall and it videos it. And you can zoom in and zoom out, but the definition's not terribly good. The camera's not terribly good at adapting to light changes, and stages tend to be quite dark, with half the bits that are lit. So people can be whited out really easily. The sound is very flat. And we came to the conclusion that if we were going to do it, the only way to do it would be to actually specifically have probably 2 rehearsals that you gave over just to videoing it. And one you might have, say, 2 cameras at the back of the hall filming in, and the next one you'd have 2 people with moving cameras doing close-ups of actors speaking, and then some poor bugger has to put all of that and edit it into a play, and that might look reasonable. The trouble with that is that it means losing 2 rehearsals to do it, because you would be stopping and starting a lot in order to get things right. And as we later found when we did do a video during lockdown, the editing side of it is a really long process. And somebody has to do that after the show's over, when you're already moving on to the next thing, and then some poor sod is sitting in a room making this thing look like something, when actually the drama group has moved on. And it would need to be that in order to do justice to it, we've always thought. And if we just videoed it, and we videoed the occasional bit, like a scene or a song from a musical, and it looks terrible because it just doesn't have any soul in it. And you tend to be videoing in an empty theatre, so the building itself has no atmosphere when you're videoing. So by and large, no, we've not. Yes, we did. I mentioned en passant that we did as we approached lockdown, I had to cancel the show at the last minute, and then lockdown was going to go on for ages. So I decided that we would start rehearsing Love's Labour's Lost, because it was a Shakespeare that didn't involve not a lot of physical contact, was quite, I can't think of the word, but there was an element of distancing which you could keep. And by and large, it tends to be 4 guys and 4 girls, and they tend to have scenes on their own. And back in those days, you could only have 6 people in a building at the same time. So it meant that I could rehearse the stage left bit with the guys and the stage right bit with the girls separately. And in my mind, put them together. And then later on, we could have 12 people in a room, and then we had a really wide room. And I would stand in the middle of the wide room, and they would be this end being stage left, they would be this end being stage right. And I would imagine them being closer together. That all went on for ages until we got to a point where it was perfectly clear that the restrictions were not going to be released before at least 2 of the cast would have to drop out for other reasons. So we thought, well, we'll film it. So we just decided to try and chuck it together. Initially, we thought there were some nice picturesque bits around Abingdon we could film around, but we found out very quickly that one of the things that professional film people have, which we don't, is loads of people to stop the traffic and all that kind of stuff. You can't control the environment. So we then decided to film the whole thing in my back garden, which is not a huge garden, but we used the various opportunities there were to use different corners in different ways and managed to actually put together most of it before the two people that had to leave had to leave. And it sort of worked reasonably well for a given value of being chucked together. You know, they'd been rehearsing a play, and then at the last minute they were rehearsing a film, and they had no chance to really do anything with it. You just had to say, right, this is that scene. Now you're doing it over here. And then I'm going to do this bit this way over your shoulder, this bit this way over your shoulder, and then film it again from this way. And then I was the poor sod that had to edit all back into a working thing. So that made it even less likely that we'd ever do a video of a play because it was a complicated process. It was fun to do, and it did keep us engaged and in contact during a very long, tricky time. But that was a very long answer. But no, we've not videoed a play, and we probably won't ever do one.
Mm.
And now, sorry, it would be even more complicated because although Rob and Rihanna are very good about letting me do whatever I like with Discworld, you can't really film things now because whilst a film company probably wouldn't mind the fact that I'd just done, let's say, Small Gods, and they were thinking of doing Small Gods, what they don't want is my Small Gods being out there on YouTube.
Yeah. Yes. Which reminds me, you mentioned earlier that you were doing or looking at doing Witches Abroad. Did you ever end up doing that one?
I did. Yes, it was about 2 years ago we did it, and finally did get round to doing it. It had got to a point where I'd written what I thought was 99% of it and then parked it in order to do Julius Caesar and then Dracula. Then I realised the bit I hadn't written, which was some songs, weren't actually essential, and it actually worked as it was. And yes, we did do it, and it worked really well. It went down well. I was pleased with it. I had a really good set of Granny, Nanny, and Magrat for it, which helped a great deal. And it was good fun to do. And it was good to finally do it, having sort of left it for ages, because we did, when we started doing the plays in the early days, it was a lot easier for people to get the permission from Terry to have to go at doing one. So other people had done Witches Abroad, we'd been to see that. Other people had done Interesting Times and been to see that. So they were ones I avoided for ages, and Lords and Ladies, because they'd been done by another group somewhere. So I wasn't particularly interested in doing one that other people had done. But then we thought, well, we're just missing an opportunity. They're plays that are quite good fun with good stories. And we ended up doing Lords and Ladies and Witches Abroad and Interesting Times. Eventually, though Witches Abroad was right at the tail end of it all.
Okay. So is that our time up for this chat? Okay, do we have any more questions while we still have Stephen here? Yep, we have another question on the far side of the room. So we'll just have to, our poor little gopher, Jenny, is running over there.
What's the adaptation of any work that you'd most like to do that you haven't done?
That's an interesting question, actually, because after I'd done Dracula, I was quite keen to think what else I might sort of wildly stab at that I'd sort of, and I couldn't think of anything that I'd fancy doing that much. There are about three that sort of sit at the back of my mind and occasionally bubble to the top. I quite fancy doing Tale of Two Cities, and I haven't done that yet. I quite fancy having a bit of a play with Romeo and Juliet and haven't done that yet. And on Discworld, I've still got Small Gods and Pyramids near the top of my wanting to do list after Trip 2. And there probably are a couple more beyond that, but those two, Small Gods and Pyramids, have been nagging away there for quite a while. And probably one of those would end up being the one after Trip 2, assuming Trip 2 actually happens, given what I've just said about me being like a dog in up.
You would be a fool not to, given how great Trip 1 is. So
it's a good, I mean, I skim read it again and reminded myself that it's, I don't mean better, but funnier and more doable than I sort of parked it in my mind.
Okay, well, if we don't have any more questions, then I guess we are just going to thank Stephen for joining us this evening here and in the morning over there.
Yes.
And I'm sure we will hopefully be able to chat to you again next time we have a Discworld convention.
Yeah.
Or even better, come visit us for a few.
Enjoy the rest of your con, everyone.
Come over the pond so that way you can actually have that brandy in the bar with us. So anyway, so if everyone can give Stephen a massive round of applause and thank you for joining us.
Really my pleasure. Thanks for the questions.